today is Gerald Posner. He's a lawyer who early in his career looked like he won the lawyer's lottery. He worked for a prestigious corporate law firm and won a very large lawsuit against AT&T in a high-stakes trial. And at the same time, he was part of a team that won a case against the German government relating to experiments in torture of twins by Dr. Mengele, that infamous, I don't even know what you want to call him. But you did that pro bono at the same time. And that's sort of interesting because here's big money and big corporate stuff. And then here's something that's just as important, but didn't have the kind of backing. As a result of doing stuff like this, you've written 13 investigative books. That's amazing. You're now considered one of the best research investigators in search of the story behind the story. So first of all, I want to just say welcome back to my show.
Great. It's good to be with you, Stewart.
And as a result of the last time that we did an interview, somebody asked me, well, how did he make the leap from being a lawyer to being an investigative reporter, and why? So well, there's question one.
Because it was unplanned. So sometimes the best things in life are the ones you don't plan, but you have to be open to them. And in this case, since I was a teenager, since I was at high school, I thought I always wanted to be a lawyer. I was in a debate club. I thought that's what law was about, was, getting in the courtroom and having a challenge on the other side. And so I went straight to law school and went straight to this large firm in New York. It's a great firm, but I found that when I was doing the pro bono work later for the twins who had been experimented on by the Nazis, that hit a passion in me that I never had when I was working at the law firm. So it's not a better, it's a different choice. You can stay with what I call the golden handcuffs, the money that you're paid inside the legal world, and stay there. And today I'd be a partner in some firm and earning a much bigger salary than I do from writing books, but I don't think I'd be nearly as happy. So that what happened was, once I did that pro bono work, that got thrown out of federal court. And after a few years, I ended up turning that into a biography of Mengele and gave some of the proceeds together with the co-author to the twins. And I came back from South America on a trip where I'd been doing research on Mengele, and said to Tricia, who was at that time, we just had gotten married in 1984. I said, Trish, these Corsicans that I met in Paraguay who were talking to me about Nazis also were telling me they used to be in the heroin trade. And they said the heroin trade has been taken over by the Chinese. I'd never heard of that. I said, wouldn't that be a great possibility for a book? Do you want to do that as another book? She, of course, was the perfect mate, I found out. She said, sure, and we were off to the Golden Triangle, and we never looked back. And as a result, ended up in the world of writing, but unplanned, completely unplanned.
As an investigative journalist, you heard some of the most outrageous conspiracy theories relating to historical events, like the Kennedy assassination, Princess Diana, the power and the money struggle in the Catholic Church. I mean, just things that people hear about but don't know. What's the wildest theory that you ever followed that proved to be true?
The murky world of Vatican finances, where a banker was found hanging under a London bridge in 1982, and the official conclusion was suicide. And at the end of all of that research, I conclude it's murder, and it's the mafia, and it's a secret Freemasonry organization called P2, which was like a government within a government. There's vestiges of the CIA and everything else around the edges. So although I'm a reporter who often debunks some crazy conspiracies, occasionally I find them. So, people think that if you don't find a conspiracy on one area, you don't believe them at all. No, I know conspiracies are alive and well. Our own government at times does the best possible efforts to undermine the best things for the people. And sometimes they're real and sometimes they're not. That's part of reporting, is you have to go in with a mind not knowing what you're going to find, but willing to either debunk it or confirm it.
You've got a reputation for really going deep into your research. So along comes a story that's there that that's under the radar, nobody knows, and now suddenly you're interested. And the people in power, have they ever tried to push you away?
Yeah, no question. I mean, I've ended up many times getting what I call the door shut in my face. You just can't make any more progress. The Vatican tried that a number of times. They wouldn't let me into their archives. They gave me the stiff arm regarding research. It made it a much more difficult process. If you have the time, you can put it together, even if they do try to cut you off. But there are other periods in which I'm a I have in some ways, when I go to a new project now, the benefit and the disadvantage of my background on my other books. Occasionally, when your background is all investigative work, and we've often looked at the darkest possible subjects at times, from 9/11 to political assassinations to Nazi war criminals, that helps you in some ways, but it also makes it difficult because people say, "Oh, this guy's going to do a muckraking book." And I don't know what type of book I'm doing until I get into it.
But what is it about conspiracy theories that sort of hooks people to that event and they can't let go of the conspiracy, even though it's been debunked?
It was explained in a journalistic way by William Manchester, the historian who wrote Death of a President. He said that in his book, in which he was talking about the death of John Kennedy, he said, if on you look at, let's say, the Holocaust, on one end of a scale, if you have this weight scale, on one end you have the Nazis, the worst possible criminals, and on the other end you have 6 million dead Jewish victims and millions of others who were killed in the Holocaust. There's a balance of sorts. There's this horrendous genocide, horrendous evil. In the Kennedy assassination, for instance, on one side of the scale, you have this young, charismatic president with so much potential for the future. Camelot, where we've come out of the gray era of Eisenhower in the 50s, and suddenly we're in Technicolor with the Kennedys. And then it all ends on that day in Dallas. And on the other side of the scale, you have this just turned 24-year-old sociopath with a $12 rifle, and it doesn't quite balance. You want to put something else on the conspiracy side, whether it's the CIA trying to kill him, or the Russians have to kill him, or Castro wants to eliminate him because he's trying to overthrow him, or the mafia wants him dead. If it's a conspiracy, it makes us feel better some ways about Kennedy's death, as though it wasn't a useless death. It's still terrible, but there was a reason why they killed him. And a conspiracy gives us some sense of order in the world. It's not just chaos. If it's a lone assassin killing him for his own warped motivations, the world is chaotic. And I happen to believe, unfortunately, the world is chaotic. So I wish that everything was neatly explained in terms of conspiracy, but it's often not. I understand why people refuse to give up on them. There's one last thing, Stewart. I think that people get confused between having a motive for a conspiracy and then doing the act. And what I mean is this. For instance, I have no doubt that if you take any sitting American president, there's some group out there talking about killing them at a certain time, whether it's anti-abortion people, or it's white supremacists, or Islamic fundamentalists, whatever. In Kennedy's case, you could have a group of mobsters sitting around a table and saying, we want to get rid of that no good SOB because his brother's destroying us. You could have the Cubans doing it and others. So there were conspiracies brewing against JFK. But what you have to ask yourself as a researcher, as a reporter, is, was the shooter working for one of those conspiracies, or did he get there ahead of all of them and do it on his own? So people get confused. They say, I think it was a conspiracy. What they're saying is, I think there was a group of people that wanted to kill Kennedy, but then you need to tie the shooter into that group. It's not always easy to do. And it's only by tracking those down after a while that you realize that one of the most difficult parts of history in recreating it and looking back on what's credible is weeding through the information that's been put there by others who put themselves into the story. And it's a fascinating tale, but it's just not true in the end. And let me tell you, as a writer, as a reporter, as somebody who pays their mortgage by writing for a living, I want to come up with the biggest possible story. So the greatest thing for me to do, if I could, is come up with the credible evidence. But in the end, if you can't find that evidence, you have to report what you find. And I think that's always the challenge for those of us who work in this industry. Is our hope is we're going to come up with the big story, the next Aaron Brockovich.
Have you ever started on a story and it looks like this is going to lead to something, and then you hit a brick wall and you realize there's no place to go?
quite a few times. You just hit a brick wall after chasing down a field that looks remarkably productive at first, and then it doesn't go any further. And that is very deflating. But there are two things that keep you going, if it's a book at least. You have an investment of already so much time. So I've never had it happen on a book. In 13 books, and Tricia's 3 books, neither of us have had it happen that the very first lead we follow is the one we hit the brick road wall on. So that's good. So we're already into the book in some ways. Then on other leads, we do get that real letdown where something we think is going to be fantastic doesn't pan out. We get the door closed. And the only thing that keeps you going at that point is you have a commitment to the publisher. You signed a contract. You have a deadline. Your livelihood depends on finishing that manuscript, and you just have to keep going. You can't have what I call writer's block.
Did you ever consider taking some of your stories, which are real and fact-checked and all of that, and maybe turning it into a fictional story that could become a movie or something?
Yes, I have indeed, and as a matter of fact, I do have one novel in those 13 books published back in 1989 called Bioassassins. It's about a retrovirus, which is sort of loosely based. HIV was a retrovirus, and it's a biological warfare weapon being developed between the Soviet Union and the United States. Some of that was based on real reporting. I made it into a novel. But I like nonfiction because I get to unravel parts of a story that no one has looked at before. So, if you take the pharmaceutical industry or the Vatican or the Kennedy assassination or 9/11, you think to yourself, what's new? What can we possibly find out? The talent is I put the blinders on. I always find something new. And then in the end, what I find in that story can become a documentary, which I like. And so I think Pharma, my last book on the drug industry, R.J. Cutler, was a great documentarian. He did War Room and others. He's going to turn that into 6 one-hour episodes. I think they're very close to finishing that. So that's the great payoff in the end. You do see it on the little screen or big screen or on the computer screen, but not quite as a fictional movie in that way.
Well, this is a good time to say thank you very much stopping by. I look forward to seeing you and Trish soon in person.
Absolutely. And Stewart, because I think that when Trish and I moved here, we've been here 17 years now in South Florida, having been in New York City before that for 25, 26 years. And when we first arrived in South Florida, compared to Manhattan, it seemed like a cultural wasteland. Right? We weren't quite accustomed to it. We couldn't hang out every day at the New York Public Library or the Met or whatever else. And then slowly over time, we ended up meeting creative people like you and Dina and a group of others that really make the area come alive. So I do look forward to seeing both of you again, because it's that creative network that I think helps all of us who are in creative enterprises, who earn our living from doing this, have the extra little bit of get up and go.
It's good seeing you, and let's talk again real soon.
Absolutely. And I just want to say I'm Gerald Posner, and I am alive on South Beach.